Hello and welcome to The Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show that asks the question, what was the name of the knight who invented the round table? Circumference. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Paladins of the West Kingdom from Garphill Games and Renegade Game Studios. In Paladins of the West Kingdom from Garphill Games and Renegade Game Studios, 1 to 4 players attempt to gain the most victory points by utilizing this very unique worker placement mechanic. Now, there is a common long game board that is set out that's going to contain a lot of information and a lot of places to place various items you can throughout the game, and a lot of cards will be coming off of that as well. Each player also has their own worker placement board in which they are going to place workers and lay their specific paladin card for that turn. Now, the common game board will have 3 King's Order cards and 5 King's Favor cards. Now, they're going to be turned over during the course of the game. At one point, 1 Order and 1 Favor card will be turned over at the same time, which means there are 7 game rounds. You'll also have a spot for townsfolk who will be helpful, who can provide certain advantages during the game. And you'll also have a spot for the outsiders. These are potential enemies of the kingdom that you can either attack or convert. Now, players have their own Paladin deck. Now, these are the same amongst the 4 different players, and the backgrounds are slightly different to indicate who gets which cards, but they're essentially the same decks. What you're going to do is every round you're going to select 3 of those Paladin cards. You're going to select 1 to play that turn, 1 to put on the top of your deck, and 1 to put on the bottom of your deck. Now, these Paladins, first of all, are going to give you 2 different kinds of workers, different colored workers that you can have that turn, and then you're also going to have some special ability that will kick in for that round. Players are also going to select one of the revealed tavern cards. This should be equal to player count plus 1, I believe. You go ahead, you grab one of these tavern cards, and they have 4 different workers on it of different colors. So you're going to look at the workers from your tavern card and from your paladin card, and you're going to go ahead and collect those 6 workers for your turn. Next, you have the action round, and you're going to go ahead and place those colored workers you have on the various spots on your own personal worker placement board that allow you to do different things. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the actions. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights here. One of the things you can do is develop. Essentially, if you place the correct colored workers in the spots, and again, you got to match the colors, and there are a few wild spaces. But you go ahead and if you do a develop action, you can take a workshop and place it on another action, meaning you'd have to have fewer. You can use fewer workers in future turns for those actions. You can recruit, meaning you could, depending on how many workers you put there, you can either get rid of a townsfolk card, but you get a certain one-time advantage, or you can actually recruit them into your kingdom, and you will have them for a persistent advantage for every round. You can place workers to hunt and trade. This is a way you're going to gain provisions and silver, which are the currencies of the game. You can choose to pray. If you put the appropriate colored worker there, you can pray, which means you can remove all of your workers from another spot. You can't use those workers again, but that opens up that spot so you can do it again on that same turn. You can do a conspire action, which will give you a purple worker. The purple worker is the criminal. Now, if you do that, you do have to take a suspicion card, which may give you a small bonus in silver, but could have potential effects later in the game. But criminals are useful because they can take the place of any worker color. You can commission. If you have enough provisions, you can go ahead and send a monk on a journey to the common player board where there are certain actions that he can take there. You can fortify. Essentially, you can construct parts of your wall, which will help you to gain military power and possibly give you other advantages like victory points. You can do the garrison action, which again allows you to send kind of a military presence to the common player board to give you certain one-time advantages. You can absolve. Essentially, you can pay some silver and do the appropriate workers, and you can send a jar to a special part of your board, which allows you to, again, do certain one-time advantages. You can attempt to attack one of the outsiders. There's different attack values. If your military strength is at that attack value, you can attack them. And then you can also convert. You can attempt to convert them if your faith level is high enough to convert those specific guys. Now, if you attack them, again, you get that kind of one-time advantage. But if you convert them, you get an ongoing advantage. Now, there are some other different ideas here. Like I say, anytime you get a criminal, for however you get a criminal, you also take a suspicion card. Now, depending on if you have those suspicion cards, you may also be required to take some money from the tax. The tax is some of the money that is set aside in a certain pool. As soon as that is done, there's an inquisition. Whoever has the most suspicion cards is going to be penalized, and that can hurt you in the game. Now, at some times, you may also be required to take on debts. If you take on a debt, it's essentially like -3 victory points at the end of the game, unless you actually find a way to flip the card. There are certain spots on the board that let you flip the card. If you flip the card, it's worth 1 positive victory point at the end of the game. Now, once you go ahead and you've taken all your actions, you place all your workers, you pass. Once everybody has passed, then you do some cleanup and you go on to the next round. Now, again, as I say, you've got those King's Order cards there, which are just kind of basic bounties. If you get this done, you get so many victory points at the end of the game. The King's Favor cards are essentially new spaces where you can send your workers to do specific things that will help you through the course of the game. Now, after the 7th game round, you go ahead, you tally up all of your points, you look at all the various spaces on your player board or the common board where potentially you could get points from, or any cards you've accumulated. You add those all together, and whoever has the most points wins Paladins of the West Kingdom. So Paladins of the West Kingdom is not a game that was really on my radar. I was aware of it, but it looked too Euro-y for me, and I was not really terribly interested. Then, not too long ago, I had somebody leave a comment on one of my videos that I should try it, and they said, I know you don't like Euros, and you're not a big Euro guy, but I think you'll get a kick out of Paladin. So that kind of intrigued me. So I went ahead, and I contacted the designer. They sent me a copy. And so I played it. I got to tell you, I was really intimidated, and my friends were really intimidated. I read the rules, and it just seemed a blur to me. And I watched some other instructional videos, and then it made a little bit more sense. But still, going into it, I was just thinking this is not going to be a great experience. By the time we sat down and got started, we were probably still reading rules for about an hour before we actually started playing. And then once we started playing and things started to click within about 2 turns, this game made perfect sense. Perfect sense. And it's one of those things where I can't believe I was making this more complicated than it needed to be. And the game is really not that complicated. There are just a lot of different systems in play. And if you're familiar, I go back to, say, like Twilight Imperium, which is one of my favorite games. I don't think it's that complicated a game, but there's a lot of systems in play. And it's kind of the same thing here. Once you understand all the different systems, and once you recognize and kind of understand the iconography, which is always a big part of these kinds of games, then you are you're going to be okay. The game is not hard. I have to say, this is, for me, one of those games that has one of the biggest intimidation factors to actual ease of gameplay maybe I've ever played. It was not nearly as difficult as I was expecting it to be. But it's an interesting take on worker placement because, again, I like how the workers are color-coded, and you can only use specific colored workers for certain actions. And the way you get those specific colors by the mixture of the Paladin cards and the Tavern cards is also very interesting. You never know quite what you're going to get or what you're going to be able to get every round, and you just have to make the best of it. But again, this is kind of a victory point salad. There's so many possibilities and roads to victory. You've got the different tracks, too, I didn't mention, like military strength, faith, and influence. And you're trying to manipulate those. Those give you victory points the higher they are, but they also allow you to do different things during the course of the game. So it's very important that you stay on top of those as well. But you're not going to be able to do everything. You kind of have to pick a strategy and go with it. You can try to do military stuff, build the wall, and go after the outsiders. You can try to convert them, or you can really focus on one or more of those tracks. or you really focus on doing those little kind of one-off things here and there that are going to help you. But there's a lot of different things, or the workshops, or the garrisons, what have you. There's a lot of different little things and little ways you can go and try to manipulate to get to victory. I was playing with George, and George was just a demon. We'd all be done with our workers, but he'd managed a way to do things that gave him more and more workers, and it was just like, oh my gosh, he keep going and going. He was just a demon at this game. It's a puzzle, and it's a very, very well done puzzle. The commenter who told me I would really like this game, they weren't wrong. I actually really enjoyed this game once I got it all figured out. So shortly after we began the game, as I say, it made a lot of sense to me, and it was kind of really engaging and really, I don't know, strategic, I guess is the word, trying to go after those points. I could go on and on. There's a lot more to this game. I'm just scratching the surface, but there's a lot of meat to be found here. Very well done. I know there are several other games in this series. I might have to look into those as well. But needless to say, I really, really enjoyed Paladins of the West Kingdom, and the Discriminating Gamer highly recommends it. Buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. And if you like military history, I recommend you check out my other YouTube channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD. Thank you once again for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen, and let me ask you this. What do you call a knight that's been attacked by cannibals? Canned food.
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
It's the armor that keeps me from getting pierced by arrows.
That's the arrows of metaphorical arrows or real arrows?
I'm going to say both.